Sometimes you can't help but listen to what you say.
Good morning. At this point, we're going to begin our executive sessions today. I would ask that you join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And at this point, I'll open the executive session on House Bill 32 FN, and I recognize Representative Rhodes to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion of ITL for House Bill 32.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the reasonings that our prior speaker brought this bill to us. I understand the reasons why he wrote it. Listening to the testimony, there was a lot of unintended consequences I think that will happen if this bill were to pass. A perfect example was if a person is walking their child to school. I think a worse situation than having their gun on them is leaving it in somebody's yard as they're getting ready to approach the school so they don't have it. The other thing would be if you were going to pick up your child from an event, you would be breaking the law if you're carrying. So for those reasons, amongst others, I make a motion to ITL.
Representative Prue, would you like to speak to your second?
I believe in the same things that the representative just said. We're going to make law-abiding citizens who just have a moment of absence of thought into criminals, and I don't think that's what anybody wants. So it does have a really good idea behind it. I just don't think it's going to work as intended. So
Thank you. I will open the discussion. If we could make absolute sure that no firearms or any deadly weapons at all got into our schools, I think that would be a laudable thing. Unfortunately, all this does is tell people who have no intention of committing a crime, because they're the only ones who would listen to it, that they can't bring a firearm onto the school property or within some distance of a school. The people that are already ignoring the law, in other words, I'm going to murder people, are not going to stop just because of this law. If we could find a way to do such a thing, that would be great, but it doesn't. So all it does is tell people who have no intention of committing a crime that they will become criminals if they walk near a school with a firearm. Like I said, if we could find a way to make the school perfectly safe and we could somehow get into the minds of criminals, but we can't. So with that said, further discussion. Representative Muse.
I'm going to be opposing the ITL motion, and one of the reasons why I'm opposing it, there are people in my community who are extremely concerned about this. They were not aware of the fact that the federal gun-free school zones law was not being enforced in New Hampshire. They became aware of the fact that we're only one of 3 states that currently doesn't do that. One of the things I think that we do need to weigh as we make this decision are all the incidents we've been hearing about in the media this year about mass shootings, and a fairly significant percentage of them have involved shootings in schools where there haven't been incidents where people have lost their lives and been wounded. There have been other incidents where entire schools have been swatted. And we're we're running into a situation, or many parents are starting to run into a situation where they are, their children are afraid to go to school. And I think in New Hampshire, one of the things we want is we want every child to be able to to be able to go to school. I think the way that most of us did when we were kids. The last thing I think that any of us thought of was the possibility that somebody could walk into our classroom or walk onto our school grounds and shoot one of us. This bill, as it stands, does not prevent a shooting. None of the bills that we will consider today will prevent the possibility of these things happening. But what we can do is we can reduce the risk and close the window a little bit. And every one of these things that we pass, we close the window a little bit and we reduce the level of risk. This is something that I think we owe our kids and we owe our teachers. Many other states do it. That's why I'm opposing the ITL.
Thank you. Further discussion? Representative Selig.
Thank you very much. I also will be opposing the move to ITL. I was a teacher during Columbine. I taught in Maryland, and I taught during the time of the DC sniper. And if you aren't familiar with that, it was people literally driving around in a car with a long-range gun and shooting people at schools and shooting people at gas stations and grocery stores, and was in lockdown in our school for weeks. And now I have 2 students in high school who've never known a year without a school shooting. They were in preschool and elementary school for Sandy Hook. They were in middle school for Parkland. And the number of shootings that they have lived through has led to a few different things to happen for my kids and for their peers. One is that my 17-year-old, who weighs all of 100 pounds, walks into every single classroom and every room she goes into on a daily basis, looking first for where are the exits, where are the hiding places, where are the projectiles, and who in the room is more important than she is so she can throw her body in front of them when a shooter comes in. That's how she lives her life as a 17-year-old, instead of focusing on, statistics and history and everything else. That's what comes to the front of her mind at the beginning. It's not fair to our kids. Our kids are begging us, and their parents and other parents and parents in my community, including one who lost a nephew in the Oxford school shootings 2 years ago, are begging us to take action. So yes, it's true. We can't stop every criminal. We'll never stop every criminal. We'll never stop every sociopath who's out there. It's not possible. But what we can do is take incremental steps to make things safer. And it's crucial that we do whatever it takes to protect our kids, to find whatever steps we can, so that if someone does walk into school with a gun, they are removed from the building or the gun is removed from them to give our kids a better chance of surviving that day.
Thank you. I would respond to several of the comments. I just want to make it clear. The current state of law in New Hampshire is that the only way you can carry a firearm onto school property is if you have a license to carry a firearm. Currently in New Hampshire, we are what's called a constitutional carry state. So the vast majority of people no longer carry licenses to carry firearms unless they intend to travel out of the state for reciprocity reasons. So to be able to actually, the way the law is now, you have to get the license to carry, which requires a background check by the local police chief. So it's not like just everyone is able under the current law to walk into the school with a firearm. And secondly, to the things that you just said and that Representative Muse said, which are absolutely true and laudable, but if this bill became magically law tonight, it would not change the fact that children would still have to worry, and we have to address the problem of violence in this society. And stop focusing on the inanimate object, because what we've done is we will say it's illegal to bring that in there. Again, I go back to the person who wants to hurt children in that school doesn't care what law we pass. Representative Janvern.
That's an interesting ringtone. I would just say that I've actually been contacted by 3 school teachers in one of the districts that I represent here in this house. I can't disclose and I won't disclose who they are. And they told me that they carry a firearm to school as a teacher and they are doing it to protect their students. If this bill were to pass into law, we'd be stripping them of that right to defend themselves and others as we guarantee them in Article 2A of our Constitution. Secondary to that, I'm a volunteer, a compensated volunteer for my local emergency management office. And we recently had a drill at one of our schools in my district, again, I won't disclose which, where the scenario was that our local Department of Public Works would send their trucks to block entrances and exits of the school. And when the drill came to be, it was found out that 3 out of the 5 Department of Public Works employees were carrying firearms to defend themselves and others. If this law were to pass, this bill were to pass into law, those 3 DPW workers would not be able to carry a firearm to defend themselves and others. So I definitely am supporting the ITL recommendation from this committee. Thank you.
Representative Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I do know is that criminals don't follow laws, and that's why they're criminals. And I don't see any logic in disarming law-abiding citizens to have a feel-good and make soft targets of our schools. In addition, a lot of communities have schools that have their zones posted in a lot of residential areas as well, which presents a problem. The federal government established the school zones as a separate charging document when it comes to enhanced firearms violations. And at the end of the day, I will support this ITL.
Thank you. And also, as a reminder, this bill would make 1,000-foot buffer zone. If you ever look at a map, that's a huge distance that this would swoop into and cover people that they wouldn't be legally allowed to carry their firearm. And Representative Bowling.
Thank you. I'm reminded of the discussion that we had on the bill about warrants when someone's hunting. And if I remember correctly, one of the things that ring true with a lot of us is the idea that there are areas that are the commons, and there are certain agreements that you make when you step foot in certain places. And I understand and definitely to a large extent agree with the idea that criminals don't follow laws, but we don't have laws in place to tell people what not to do. We have laws in place to provide justice when they violate them. And that's the entire reason for having laws against behaviors that we find unacceptable in our society. If we only made laws against just the reasoning there is like kind of makes me want to laugh. The idea that you would only implement a law if you thought someone would follow it, but not if you didn't think they would follow it, kind of negates the existence of this entire building and all of our positions. But circular reasoning can do that to you. I think that if we're going, for example, if we're going to have properties where we permit people to hunt, then it is incumbent upon the state to ensure that the wildlife is managed in a way where the animals can continue reproducing in sufficient number where they're still available for hunting in the future, right? I think that's reasonable. And similarly, any other publicly available or publicly accessible property needs to be managed responsibly by the government if it wants to have those kinds of entities. So I'll be opposing the ITL. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just respond and say that laws are indeed designed to punish those who would, but they also are designed for a deterrent effect. So it's not necessarily circular logic. I believe that having a law in place deters people from breaking the law as much as it is for punishing the people who do it. Representative Newman.
So we've talked a lot about this law, and I just want to remind people, and I found this out because I found out and reviewed the current law that talks about what is constitutional and what is not constitutional. It's called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. And it was it's several months ago that this was passed. And there is no constitutional right to carry firearms into sensitive buildings, and it says in the court decision, specifically schools and government buildings. So there is not a constitutional protection for that. And that's why the federal state law, the federal 1,000-foot regulation has not been overturned by the courts. So, and we've talked about how do we protect the random citizen that goes into a school just in case there might be they might be assaulted in the school. So if you want to test the exceptions to the rule, then pass a law and put the court test on it and see if it's constitutional or not. That's why listening to this rule is that this law is constitutional. We heard a lot of that when we had the public hearing. I had the Constitution waved at us and said, don't you read the Constitution? This law is constitutional. That, in fact, this is unconstitutional. That, in fact, is a false statement. So I'm going to not vote. I'm going to not vote for the ITL because of that, because I think we should be passing laws that will protect our citizens, and for the most part, the majority of Americans oppose guns in the schools. But there are exceptions to that, because you can have resource officers, and you can write a rule that says you can have teachers to be armed legally so they're not breaking the law, and have them take their guns to school like that and go ahead and do it. But I will vote against this law.
Thank you. I would say that so far, at least in this room during this process, no one has made the argument that this would be unconstitutional. In fact, I would openly agree the state does have the power to regulate where firearms are carried in sensitive buildings. So we would be within the Constitution if we were to pass this. I agree with you. There was actually arguments made at the hearing where people did say that they thought this would be unconstitutional, and I agree with you per the court case that you are correct. It would not be unconstitutional.
I specifically avoided saying it was anybody in this room, because I have not heard
you.
any testimony like that today.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and ask the clerk to call the roll.
We are now going to take a vote on House Bill 32. Vice Chairman Rhodes.
Just a reminder that the motion is ITL.
Motion is ITL.
I vote yes.
Representative Pratt.
Yes.
Representative Hill.
Yes.
Representative Prue.
So we're
Represent-
ITLing this, yes?
Yes.
Then that would be a yes.
What was your vote?
Yes,
Yes, thank you.
sorry.
Representative Jandrin.
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
Representative Stone.
Yes.
Representative Tenzar.
Yes.
Representative Harriet Gathright.
No.
The clerk votes yay, yes. Representative Muse.
No.
Representative Bolden.
No.
Representative Newman.
No.
Representative Murphy.
No.
Representative Newman. You have two Newmans, so no, nay for both. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Hold on.
I actually didn't say anything. Yes, I'm a no.
Oh, yes, okay. Representative Vale.
No.
Representative Newell.
No.
Representative Selig.
No.
Representative Wheeler's not here. Chairman Roy.
The chair votes yes.
Nine. So the ITL vote passes 10-9.
Okay, House Bill 32, the motion was inexpedient to legislate. The motion carries. I hereby close the executive session. I hereby open the executive session, House Bill 46, and I recognize Representative Reed to make a motion.
I motion to retain House Bill 46.
Second.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
I feel the bill needs some more refining, and we have a few bills out currently along the same line. So I am I move to retain the bill for further refinement.
Would you like to speak to your second, Representative?
Sure, pretty much the same reasons. We do have a bunch of these bills coming, and this one didn't quite complete the circle of what it needed to do. So I think it needs some work, and maybe with some of the other bills, we can come up with a better bill.
Thank you. And just so the committee understands, we are going to work on one of these this summer, and we are going to come up with a bill. So in case anyone's thinking we're kicking this can down the road, we are not. We will be working on this, and I believe we'll be making a study commission out of one of them. I believe Representative Gathrights, and we will be getting a piece of work out of this committee that can pass everybody. Further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Rhodes,
Yes.
And again, this is a motion to retain.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Sytek,
No. Hill.
Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Janvrin,
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
Yes.
for Bradley, right, okay. Representative Muse,
Yes.
Representative Bolden,
Yes.
Representative Sue Newman,
Yes.
Representative Murphy,
Yes.
Representative Ray Newman,
Yes.
Representative Murray,
No, that's,
Representative Newell,
Yes.
Representative Selig,
Yes.
and Chairman Roy.
Chair votes yes.
Mr. Chair,
Excuse me, Representative Newman.
I think when, did you get the vote?
Did you get Representative Vale?
Yes.
Just so everyone knows, our people who aren't normally here, our clerk is out today, and I thank the representative for taking over, and so have some patience with us as we sort out our clerk situation.
So it's unanimous, 10-10.
So the motion to retain carries, House Bill 46 by a unanimous vote, and 19-0. What did I say? Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you for
19-0.
fixing my. And I hereby close the executive session. I hereby open the executive session on House Bill 59, and I recognize Representative Stone to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I motion to ITL House Bill 59.
Do I hear a second? Second. Representative Stone, would you like to speak to your motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would. Currently, FFLs are utilized to do commercial background checks on all sales in New Hampshire. In addition, they use the NICS system, which is a federal system for long guns. In the state of New Hampshire, all handguns are done by the state police gun line, which I believe the cost on that is around $10 million a year to operate, and it's done by your driver's license number as well to verify identity. This bill really serves no legitimate purpose in enhancing safety. We already have a process in place that all FFLs are mandated to follow. There is no deviation from that. And I really think that this is just a duplicating effort of federal law.
Representative Pruitt, would you like to speak to your second?
That was exactly what I was going to say, that the law is already in place and is followed in this state by every gun dealer, commercial gun dealer. And if they step around that, there are penalties for it. So I don't see a need for this.
Thank you. I'll open the discussion. I think that the way the statute's written, I think there's a lot of issues with the use of the word commercial. It would go a lot further if it just said private, because I think that's what they're trying to do, is regulate the sale of private between two individuals. And I think that the statute, it on some level makes sense, but it needs to there needs to be exemptions. People shouldn't be at risk or have to go to a dealer to get a background check to sell to someone who they know or in their family. The current state of the law is it is illegal to sell a firearm to a prohibited person or to someone that you do not personally know. That is the current state of the law. I have not heard, law enforcement did not testify that there's an issue or that they've discovered a rash of sales, private sales that are leading to crimes. There is a possibly a version of this law that I could support in the future if it was very carefully crafted. But this is a very broad, and I can't support it for that reason. What we did hear from law enforcement is that we need to worry about is straw purchases. And those are people that come up and buy firearms legally through a dealer for the purpose of giving it to someone else. And that is handled with federal law currently, but it is still a problem that they need to work harder on, in my opinion. Further discussion. Representative Newman.
Can I just ask the chair a question to clarify? You
Absolutely.
say that is the state of the law. Is it federal law, state law, where that is
It's-
exactly written down?
Okay, so in current state law, it's illegal to sell a firearm to someone you don't know personally. The other parts of the law discussed with the straw purchases is federal law. Go ahead.
Is the federal law just says that it's an illegal, the only state law that I know about says it's illegal to sell a firearm to a felon.
I believe that is incorrect. Could someone call up the current statute? Does anyone have it handy? Representative Muse probably
Mr.
has-
Chairman, RSA 159 does state that it must go through a federal firearms licensed dealer with a background check unless it's somebody you personally know and they are not prohibited.
Oh, could you tell us the statute number again? I knew that's what it said, but I didn't know the number. What is it? RSA what? It's in section 159.
Okay, and I don't see any contradiction with what this says. It says you are not responsible, according to the amendment with the law, that where that one paragraph was left out. It said if you know you can sell it to somebody if you know they are not a prohibited person. And so I don't see where this conflicts with that law at all.
And it may not. It may be just duplicative. Any further discussion? Representative Sue Newman.
Yes, I would just add that I believe background checks, and I believe most of you would agree, background checks do work. I don't have a statistic right in front of me, but in the past, I have certainly read and seen numbers where X number of people were booted out of the system and did not qualify. So they do work. And as was previously said, this is a time, because of recent events, we owe it to our children, we owe it to our grown children to do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Newman, and thank you for joining us again today. We're happy to have you with us. I agree that no one on this committee would say that background checks are not good and that background checks do not work. And currently, we believe that background checks are being conducted. In the current state of New Hampshire law says that if you don't know someone, you cannot sell them a firearm without a background check. And I agree with the events around the country happening. This law would not prevent one of them. And it's currently covered already. Representative Selig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just point out that the purpose of this specific bill is to close the Charleston loophole. And if we think about the circumstances of that particular event and the fact that I can't go to religious services at my synagogue without having to hire armed police to keep our services safe because of people who use loopholes like this to buy guns illegally, that we have a problem that we need to address. So I will be voting against ITL. I want to recognize that if we use common sense, we should be coming up with common sense solutions and not looking for additional ways to put more obstacles to preventing gun violence.
Thank you. For the benefit of the committee, would you mind explaining the Charleston loophole?
It allowed the young man to, who's, the time frame for him getting his background check wasn't completed, and that he was therefore given a gun before it was completed. It was proven he wasn't supposed to be given a gun, that he had a number of things. And this is one of the steps to close that loophole, to make it so that he would not have been given a gun.
So just to expound on that for the committee, that the current law is, the federal law is if you go for a background check and it takes them more than 3 days to complete the background check, the dealer is authorized to transfer the firearm to the purchaser, regardless of the background check. And that is, in my mind, a flaw in federal law, which covers this, and they need to fix it. It is my experience that it is very rare that that happens. They are very quick. So I don't know the circumstances of that particular case, but it doesn't appear to be a New Hampshire problem. Representative Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to point out, if the committee is not aware of it, that there was bipartisan legislation at the federal level that has made it now a new requirement for FFLs. Anyone under the age of 21 years old ends up having an automatic 3-day delay. Then during the course of that 3-day delay, you get a phone call that gives you another 10-day delay for them to continue their next research. So they've kind of closed in on that, if you're not aware of it.
So Representative Stone, just for everyone's benefit, I'm going to repeat that. Currently, there is federal bipartisan legislation coming forward to close that. And also currently, it is the state of the law that if you're under 21 years old, there's an automatic 3-day delay in purchasing a firearm. And if it takes them longer than that, an automatic 10-day kicks in. So anyone under 21 currently is not able to get a firearm when they walk in the store and walk right out with it. Is that correct, Representative Stone?
That is correct.
Thank you. Representative Muse.
So given the fact that there is some emerging consensus on this at the federal level, one of the things that New Hampshire can do is actually pass this law in case that doesn't make it through at the federal level. I think changes to gun laws at the federal level have the same level of difficulty, maybe perhaps even a higher level of difficulty than legislation like this has in New Hampshire. The other thing that I wanted to say is that in addition to closing the so-called Charleston loophole, one of the things that this bill would also do is require a background check for unlicensed sellers. So one of the things that we have heard is that there are places where you can go online, put a gun up for sale, and in many cases the gun is not, or at least let me clarify that. In some cases, there is no background check, and the firearm is actually exchanged between two people who have no relationship other than the relationship that they have online. There is also something called the gun show loophole, which allows a private, or I'd say one of the things we struggle with a little bit is the definition between a commercial seller and a private seller. So if you're using an internet website, if you're using a classified ad, if you're selling a weapon at an advertised event, that actually counts as a commercial sale. It's not the same thing as selling an extra firearm to your neighbor or selling it to your brother or something like that. What the bill is very careful to do is to define what a commercial sale is. Representative Smith also offered an amendment during the public hearing when she introduced the bill that clarified some of that language as well. So, you know, I think this is one of those things that I think a lot of people think makes sense to do. I think the idea that there are people who shouldn't have a gun, who potentially can slip through the cracks, is something that should bother all of us, especially some of the members of our committee who are former police officers. I don't think anybody wants to have to deal with anything even resembling an unnecessary tragedy with a firearm. So I will be opposing the ITL, and I hope if the ITL goes through in the House, we will come back with a better bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Muse. I'm going to talk for a second about online. There's a lot of talk about online we hear from people. I myself sold a firearm online, a hunting rifle that I no longer use. I regret it because you should just never sell firearms because you regret it. I use a website called gunbroker.com. You list the weapon, you sell the weapon, someone bids on it or buys it. And it's very, very, very strict. What has to happen is the firearm has to be sent by me to a licensed firearm dealer in whatever state that person's in. That person then has to go pick up the firearm I sold from the firearms dealer and get a background check. If they don't, or if they fail it, the firearm gets sent back to me and the sale does not proceed. And there's other companies you can buy directly online from. I've bought several from a place called Grab-A-Gun, and you go online, you look at the firearm, you make the purchase. They don't sell you the firearm. They send it to an FFL in your state, and you have to go there to pick up the firearm where you get a background check. So there may be websites like a Craigslist type of thing where people are doing that, but it's illegal, first of all, federally, to transfer a firearm like that to someone not in your state. And it's already covered. They're already doing a background check, and anyone who's not doing it is doing an illegal sale currently under federal law. And as far as the gun show loophole goes, if you go to a gun show, 99.9% of the people at gun shows are FFLs selling their wares at the gun show. And when you find a gun you like at a gun show, they do a background check on the spot. They call the FBI, they run it to get it through. If there's someone there privately selling firearms, and they don't have an FFL and they don't conduct a background check, first of all, it's illegal to sell a handgun to someone from another state without going through an FFL. And the people who run the gun shows are very strict because they'll lose their ability to run these shows. So if there's a one-off on the side sale at a gun show, it's not really a gun show loophole. It's just someone's breaking the law. The current state of the law at a gun show is if you buy a gun, the dealer at the gun show has to do an instant background check, and they do. And if they don't, they're breaking the law already. Representative Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope you'll indulge me for a comment, if I can make a comment about what you said.
Absolutely.
And then I would like to make my own comment on what I think about this particular law.
Absolutely.
Federal agents who do the right thing and do all that kind of stuff. I don't expect that goes to like the other kind of sales sites online. It may be illegal, but people are able to sell it through Google Market and pick. I don't know all the websites, but pick not particularly a gun site. They sell guns online, and there's no federal firearm agent involved in any of that. So that's what we're trying to do with the state law. And I don't take much comfort in the fact that there is a federal law coming forward as it applies to any of these laws, because we've all seen in the laws that have been submitted to this House this year are the nullification laws that we shall not spend any money enforcing federal laws. So I think that for us to do what is common sense and sensible so that we will have mirror laws, because that's the term they use in those laws, we need to have these mirror laws that cover federal law so that we can then enforce them instead of having to deal with these nullification laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Newman. Representative Salick.
Thank you. Chairman Roy, earlier you mentioned that if this bill had slightly different language, you would be more comfortable with it. I'm wondering if we could withdraw the motion to ITL and retain this bill so that we can tweak the language with a bipartisan group to come up with language we can all agree with so that we can make change and pass this bill.
Thank you. At this point, I believe that the law needs a little bit more than a tweak. It needs a thorough rewrite and examination that would require a subcommittee, which I wouldn't oppose to, Unfortunately, the calendar would not agree with that. I'm up against it. I have a week to get these bills out and reports written. So the current motion has to stand as it is, which is ITL. Representative Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to clarify, I'm reading from RSA 159.14. And prior to 14 is all of the ways that a person in New Hampshire can become licensed to sell firearms. And requiring, and it speaks to selling to minors who may be hunters, speaks to the straw purchase you spoke of earlier. If it's a parent, they can purchase it and give it to the child as long as they have a hunting license. Penalties for violating the law. But to go into 14, it says none of the provisions of this chapter shall prohibit an individual not licensed under the provisions who is not engaged in the business of selling pistols. I'm going to skip a few because it's very wordy. Under this chapter, or to a person personally known to them. So to go to the gun show, you're correct. It's a violation of law under the federal statute as well as state statute for them to do that at a gun show. In a former life, I worked for 2 retailers that sold firearms, Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods. And I was one of those responsible persons that was listed under the FFL so that I could sell firearms unsupervised. And I will tell you that never have I ever sold a firearm that it did not go through a federal firearms licensee with a background investigation, with one exception. My son's birthday last year, I gifted him a pistol. And I brought him to an FFL for a background check.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And the motion on the floor is inexpedient to legislate.
On House Bill 59, Vice Chairman Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Jandrin,
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
I vote for, the clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
No.
Representative Muse,
No.
Representative Bolden,
No.
Representative Sue Newman,
No.
Representative Murphy,
No.
Representative Ray Newman,
No.
Representative Vale,
No.
Representative Newell,
No.
Representative Selig.
No.
Mr. Chair,
Chair votes yes.
yes, so the vote passes 10-9.
The motion of inexpedient to legislate on House Bill 32 passes. I hereby close the public hearing. I'm sorry. Yeah.
59.
House Bill 59, inexpedient to legislate, passes by a vote of 10-9. I hereby close the public hearing on HB 59, and I open the public hearing on HB 76. And I recognize Representative Stone to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to ITL House Bill 76.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Prue. Representative Stone, would you like to speak to your motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would. This bill would serve no legitimate purpose for thousands of law-abiding New Hampshire citizens to purchase firearms. I know we've heard some testimony that in cases of suicide, firearms have been used, but also there's numerous cases where those who are committed to commit suicide will do it with other means such as drugs, ropes, belts, vehicles. Denying someone's constitutional right to pick up a firearm could cause them a safety issue, as we've heard testimony from, I believe it was a Women's Supportive Services group, who came in and testified that that would be detrimental for a abuser in protection. So at the end of the day, I really don't see where restricting someone's right if they are legally able to purchase a firearm should be prohibited.
Representative Prue, would you like to speak to your second?
I would. So I agree that the waiting period, on one hand is good. On another hand, it's bad. I've had a personal experience with a friend who was being threatened, got a firearm the next day, and the day after that had to actually brandish it to prevent harm to herself. So it worked out well for her. Nobody got hurt. The assailant ran away. So I've seen it where it could have been very detrimental if she had to wait the 3 days. So knowing that, I can't go with this.
Thank you. Discussion? Representative Rhodes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to reiterate what Representative Prue said. I could not think of a worse situation than telling a woman that she has to wait 3 days to protect herself. Sadly, we all know of circumstances where somebody very well may have been in that position and saying, nope, wait 3 days. About the silliest thing I've ever heard of.
Thank you. I'll acknowledge that firearms are used often in suicides. Unfortunately, we cannot read minds. We cannot predict someone's mental health, and delaying the constitutional right of the vast majority of the over 1 million residents of New Hampshire, because a very small percentage will use that right to hurt themselves, does not, in my mind, pass the balancing test. I think that it's the saddest thing in the world that people are using these to hurt themselves with, but to the testimony we've heard, people will use other methods. We cannot, for lack of a better term, wrap the state in a plastic bubble to protect everyone in case they decide to hurt themselves. And by delaying the constitutional rights of most people to protect those who may hurt themselves, I just can't justify that in my mind. Representative, who had their hand up? Representative Newman.
My comment to this is designed to prevent suicide. It's provided for people that have get in their head about suicide, and most times people know when people are depressed like that. There is a way to tell when people are mentally unstable and that potential may happen. And this is only designed, if someone has a gun in the house or has a gun of their own, this doesn't do anything to them. But it's specifically meant to somebody to go down, like we heard testimony in a previous session, where a minor went down, bought a gun with a credit card. They found out about the credit card thing. They got the gun returned, and the next day he got a gun from somewhere else and killed himself. And I will say that I keep hearing again that you have a constitutional right to be able to go into a gun store, buy a gun, and get it immediately. That is simply not true. There are waiting periods in other states. They have not been challenged, and that particular alleged right is not a right under the Constitution. It's silent on it. I believe it's silent, and there may be cases that quote those laws because it's been challenged. So I just think that we know that firearms are the most effective way to do it, and we kind of passed off people jumping and people taking pills and whatever. And I think all the percentages for all of other kinds of suicide is less than 50%. I can get the exact numbers for you and even update them for 22 because this was in the previous session. So I believe that this will go a long way to prevent harm by having people commit suicide by using the most effective thing there is to commit suicide. So I'll be opposing the ITL.
Thank you, Representative. I would, in response to your comment regarding constitutionality, I would remind the committee the Constitution does not give anybody any rights. The Constitution recognizes rights and tells the state what it can and cannot do to infringe on those rights. And the fact that it's silent on whether or not you have an immediate access to that right does not infer in any way that the state has a right to delay it. I firmly believe a right delayed is a right denied. As there is no Supreme Court case as to whether or not a state can delay a right, in my mind, you always defer to the right of the citizen versus the government. But we will amiably disagree. Go ahead,
No,
Representative.
could I just want to ask the chair a question.
Sure.
Even though that it's not there, you can't say that they have the right, and I mean, people can fall both ways when it's not mentioned in the Constitution. Thank you.
And I absolutely agree. Representative Rhodes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when you look at this bill, I think there's a lot of things I think were meant to be good. Line 28, where it says express to a law enforcement officer a reasonable fear for his or her own personal safety. It doesn't explain how you express that fear. Is that just is that a verbal fear? Is there going to be a form that has to be filled out? Line 17, it talks about if you're a hunter, taking the hunter, the education course, but it doesn't say, well, what if there's a backlog and there's a 2-month, waiting period to get into this particular law class? What if you took this safety class 3 years ago, right? So there's just a lot of things that, as much as this was intended to be good, if you actually look at the language, none of this is explained on how to do it. It for that reason alone is why, one of the many reasons. But.
Representative Muse?
Yeah, I would say a bill that actually would have an impact on the ability of people to commit suicide is actually pretty good. And thank you, Representative Rhodes, for correcting yourself from your earlier statement when you raised a concern about a woman who potentially would have an issue or might be in a situation where they might need a weapon to defend themselves immediately. When you actually read the bill all the way down, it does take into account situations like that. The reason it takes it into account is we have gone through a process over a number of years of getting feedback from people at public hearings, from members of our own committee. And each time we do this, the bill gets better and it addresses more of the concerns. We've reached a point on many of these bills, and this seems to be one of them, that literally no matter what we do is enough to address some concerns. And I think one of the things I think that we have to realize is that that when we do nothing in a country that has millions and millions and millions of firearms in circulation, when we are not willing to close the window on anything, even a little tiny bit, one of the things that we're doing is we're significantly increasing the risk for our citizens. We're increasing the risk for gun owners. We're increasing the risk for our kids in schools. We're increasing the risk for people who might have mental health problems, who might try to harm themselves. We are not helping. And I think one of the duties of this commission or this committee, and one of the reasons why we have public safety in our name, is sometimes we have to make hard decisions like this, where we have to balance rights. Our own state constitution in Article 3 actually refers, to the need periodically for us to put the public good over a natural right. That's actually in our state constitution. Nobody likes to talk about Article 3, but there it sits right underneath Article 2. So we have a public obligation to do both of these things. And I think we have an obligation to try to come to a balance in a situation like this. Not my way or the highway, or no change is ever good. But we have an obligation to the people of this state to do a better job of coming together on this issue than we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Muse. Representative Prue.
So a little bit about me is that I've been running the Granite State Critical Incident Stress Management Team for about 35 years. And that helps police, fire, EMS, any emergency responder get through bad calls and handle stress. One of the big things in my pre-incident education is suicide and suicide prevention. So I do know a little bit about that. And I have weighed both of those, again, pretty heavily, because those are my brothers and sisters that I'm trying to protect. But I also feel that there's a civilian population out there and I'm gonna go primarily female, but not just female, because some guys get threatened by females. So I do believe they have the ability or need the ability to get their firearm. And I will tell you, especially in my head, a man who's being threatened by the woman isn't going to want to go talk to the police officer and say, hey, I'm a little afraid and I need to get a gun quick. So can I get permission to do that? They just want to go get it. And, you know, just say, yeah, I need a gun or whatever. So I think that might inhibit them. So I still think this should, I understand the concerns of suicide. I really do. But I also understand the concerns of murder. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Representative Jammern.
Thank you. Well, they jacked the microphone up on me, so I'll move it away from my face. Again, I was a responsible person for an FFL and sold firearms. The Form 4473 asks 2 questions related to this bill. One, have you ever been adjudicated by a court to be mentally unable to possess a firearm? And there's a second one about drug usage. Yesterday, I actually had a citizen in my town take his own life. And he went to purchase a firearm, and he answered the 4473 truthfully and was denied the sale of the firearm. And the person that denied the sale of the firearm actually contacted authorities and explained to them he said something that he wants to harm himself. By the time the police department got that word, he had already committed suicide. So this 3-day waiting period that we're talking about here, I don't think has any effect. I think that the situation I just explained, us all taking care of each other when we see somebody in need, we give them that help that they need. Sometimes we're too late. But at the same time, the safety net that's in place is in place for a reason. The 4473 does work, especially for these things here. I don't feel like meddling in making somebody wait 3 days to defend themselves, others in the state. That's a right guaranteed under the Constitution. So obviously, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody. I'll be supporting ITL.
And Representative Saley.
Thank you. I don't think any of us believe that we can 100% prevent suicide, and we certainly can't 100% prevent suicide by gun because of the number of people who already own guns or who will find ways to get them. Again, I come back to people are asking, my constituents are reaching out to me, they're calling. As I went out and knocked on 2,000 doors in the town, almost every single person said to me, are you going to work for gun control to help stop the amount of gun violence that we have? Can you put in waiting periods? Can you help? Studies have shown, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I can get them, that something like 55% of the people who are going to a gun shop to get a gun and for the purposes of committing suicide, if they're made to wait 48 hours, in that 48 hours, someone reaches out to them and helps redirect them and saves their life. So it may be that we can't protect everybody, and clearly nothing was going to protect the person in your town, and I'm very sorry for their loss. This bill doesn't say that people suffering from domestic violence can't get a gun. Quite the contrary, it specifies them as a category of people who can. If we're not willing to take the brave step and take some action, then we're condoning every one of those gun deaths.
Thank you, Representative. I would caution us against saying that we are, the members of this committee, condoning anything. I know that you mean implicitly, but still. Like you, I got hundreds and hundreds of calls from my and visits and people I spoke to, my constituents, and said, are you going to stop them from taking our guns and limiting our rights? So I think it's clear that we all have different constituencies on this committee. And speaking for myself, I do not think that any member of this committee is a quote gun grabber. And I think everyone is operating from a position of what they think is best for the citizens of the state and their constituents. And I appreciate both sides of the argument. And through us, each of us from our individual districts are speaking for the people of the state. So, and my phone's ringing. With that, I'm going to have the clerk call the. Oh, excuse me, Representative Newell would like to.
I just wanted to throw in, especially that when we talk about natural rights, what I think what this does and the way that it was explained in some of the testimony and some of the research that I've done is that something like this takes into consideration human nature and the fact that if there is, they call it a cooling off period. And so something like this just kind of, I guess I don't agree with the fact that, the perspective that a right delayed is a right denied. I think that in some cases it should be delayed, and that's it's not harmful for it to be delayed, and it has the potential to help someone cool off and the potential to reduce harm. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. We appreciate it. With that, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're voting on House Bill 76 with the motion to ITL.
Just hold on a second. Just in case any of the members have a question, Representative Wheeler came in. He can still vote because he came in before we called the question.
Vice Chair Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Janren,
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
No.
Representative Muse,
No.
Representative Bolden,
No.
Representative Sue Newman,
I'm
Representative
sorry.
Murphy.
Excuse me. No, I didn't have my.
Okay. Representative Murphy,
No.
Representative Ray Newman,
Yeah, no.
Representative Vale,
No.
Representative Jody Newell,
No.
Representative Selig,
No.
Representative Wheeler. Excuse me? And Vice Chairman Roy.
The chair votes yes.
Okay, and it is a tie 10-10.
The motion fails and is open for further motion if anyone wishes to make one.
Mr. Chair, I move on to pass.
Do I hear a second? Seconded by Representative Selig. If anyone wants discussion, we had a pretty lengthy one. We can discuss it or move right to the vote. Anyone want to discuss this? Would you like this?
I don't want to discuss it, but I just would request that we take a 2-minute break after this one.
That sounds like a very good idea, and I'll probably turn it into a 10-minute break with my magical powers. Representative Muse, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think we've had a fairly robust discussion around this issue. Let's get through this. Thank you.
Very well said. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll. The motion on the floor is ought to pass.
Vice Chair Rhodes,
No.
Representative Pratt,
No.
Representative Hill,
No.
Representative Prue,
Negative.
Representative Janvrin,
No.
Representative Mannion.
No.
The clerk votes no. Representative Stone,
No.
Representative Tenzar,
No.
Representative Gathright,
Yes.
Representative Muse,
Yes.
Representative Bolden,
Yes.
Representative Sue Newman,
Yes.
Representative Murphy,
Yes.
Representative Ray Newman,
Yes.
Representative Vale,
Yes.
Representative Newell,
Yes.
Representative Selig,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler. And the chairman?
Chair votes no. 10-10.
10-10.
Motion fails 10-10. This will be going to the floor with no recommendation from this committee. With that, I close the executive session. on House Bill 78, and the committee will stand in recess for, thank you, 76. I'm not good with numbers. The committee will stand in recess for 15 minutes. We'll reconvene at 10:20.
From 2 to 10, 15.
I'm just going to keep multiplying it.
That's what I thought. Maybe 76.
Oh, you're right. It is 76.
Oh, was it?
Yes, it was. Thank you. 76.
Okay, thank you.
It took me a minute too, then I realized that she means it's in the red, that's why I hesitated a second. Oh, yeah, you mean in there.
You know, friends of his last night said they saw him. He's down.
Oh, don't even. Don't even.
My wife was answered. She could talk to me.
But you can say,
So I went and grabbed these for her.
Title child.
So I'm doing this.
That,
part.
that needs to be checked. Real quick.
I know, right?
So do I need to do this?
Friends over there, 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, and then exact. Oh, that's why. That's. Rachel went out there jumping, trying to get him in yet. Yeah, she was, oh, he was out there for the last bill. We were trying to get. He came in here, he didn't turn on his back. He doesn't want. Well, it's too bad.
Well, actually.
Adolescent psych. Oh, oh.
And I was waiting.
This is. Yeah.
We probably won't be talking about it.
no.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What is this, David?
Yeah, there's only a few people to guide you.
You can probably give my wife or something.
Oh, yeah, chief of man.
She doesn't need to be. Oh, Lord. I think I did. I actually already did. Last year, this is something we never had. We never had a 10-minute break.
Wait. Because I was getting up anyway.
You don't
Oop.
really,
At this point, we are going to resume our executive sessions. I am going to entertain a motion from Representative Harriet Gathright.
I would like to motion to reconsider HB 46.
Second.
Would you like to speak to your motion, Representative?
We had voted to retain the bill, but actually we had an amendment that we were given, and that amendment allowed us to put this into a study committee. So I would like everyone to vote yes on the reconsideration so we can put another motion forward.
Thank you. I would just say that this was actually my bad. I did not recognize the number and associate it to the bill that Representative Harriet Gathright had put forward that we agreed was going to be the one that we used as a vehicle for a study committee. So I would also urge the members to support the motion to reconsider. This really doesn't require any discussion unless anyone really feels they need to. Seeing no one. Go ahead. I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll. This is a motion to reconsider House Bill 46, which was voted to retain.
Vice Chairman Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Janvrin,
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
Yes.
Representative Muse,
Yes.
Representative Bolden,
Yes.
Representative Sue Newman,
Yes.
Representative Murphy,
Yes.
Representative Ray Newman,
Yes.
Representative Vale,
Yes.
Representative Newell,
Yes.
Representative Selig,
Yes.
and Chairman Roy.
Chair votes yes. Motion carries unanimously. There's now open to another motion. I recognize Representative Harriet Gathright for a motion.
I motion to, I'm sorry. I motion to pass. With amendment. 2023-0371H.
You're making a motion to pass that amendment?
Yes.
Do I hear a second? Seconded by Representative Janvrin. Representative Harriet Gathright, would you like to speak to your motion on this amendment?
Again, the amendment changes the House bill to establish a committee to study replacement of bail commissioners with court magistrates. And we had lengthy discussions on this prior, so I don't need to go through that again, but I can, do you want me to say what it's asking for? The members of the committee shall be as follows: 3 members of the House of Representatives appointed by the Speaker of the House, and 1 member of the Senate appointed by the President of the Senate. And it is due out by November 1st, 2023.
Representative Janvrin, would you like to speak to your second?
I'll go to the duties in the amendment. It says that the committee shall evaluate whether the bail commissioner should replace or be supplemented by court magistrates and assess the following benefits and problems of the current bail commissioner system: potential structure of a court magistrate system throughout the state courts, replacement of bail commissioners with court magistrates, and supplementation of the bail commissioners with court magistrates. And I think that this is a good track to look at, and I think it's a good way to work with the judicial branch to make this happen.
Thank you. I would just add that this, as I said, is the vehicle that we are going to use to give a deep dive and come up with a workable piece of legislation on bail reform. At that, I would ask the clerk to call the roll on, I'm sorry, Representative Newman, I didn't see you.
Yeah, I just have a parliamentary inquiry about the eligibility of someone to vote, and that would be the representative who came into the hall, and you hadn't started the vote yet, so
Yeah, once I call the question, he
Thank you.
can't vote, unfortunately. Oh, he can. We didn't vote yet, so he can vote. I haven't called the question. So once I say clerk call the vote, then you can't vote if you come in.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Representative, for pointing that out. Representative Muse.
One more request for clarification. Essentially, what we're doing is we're replacing the entire bill with a study committee bill. The language of this bill, while we may have issues with it in certain places, is going to be really useful. Nothing about doing this precludes us from using this language again in a different bill. Am I correct in assuming that?
That is correct. My goal in retaining all these bills was preserving the issues. Were we to ITL one of them, and we would not be able to use a similar bill or a bill with similar language. So I'm trying to preserve all these for the capability of to be used again.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Bolden.
for the benefit of the whole committee, I just was hoping to expand a little on the when you can vote thing. If you're in the room by the time the chairman instructs the clerk to start calling names and writing down the votes, then not only can you vote, but you must, just like when we're in the House. And so the structure of the process is the chair, or in the case of the House, the speaker, announces the subject matter and invites motions. Then there's the discussion debate phase, and then there's the specific voting phase, and the period of time between when the chairman says the clerk will now call the roll and when the voting happens is obviously milliseconds, and that's specifically the period during which you need to be present in the room, even if you're not in your seat yet. And I'm hoping that if I'm incorrect about anything, you could clarify that. Thank you.
I believe that's correct, and that is my current understanding as well. Thank you. And with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
For HB 46 OTP, Vice Chairman Rhodes,
Hold on. This is. I believe we're voting to pass the amendment first. OT. Did we do?
Amendment, and then the next one will be.
Yes,
authorized
that's
with
correct.
amendment. Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Janvrin,
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Stone.
Yes.
Representative Tenzar.
Yes.
Representative Gathright.
Yes.
Representative Muse.
Yes.
Representative Bolden.
Yes.
Representative Newman. Sue.
Yes.
Representative Murphy.
Yes.
Representative Ray Newman.
Yes.
Representative Vale.
Yes.
Representative Newell.
Yes.
Representative Selig.
Yes.
Representative Wheeler.
Yes.
And Chairman Roy.
Chair votes yes.
Unanimous.
Unanimously, the amendment is accepted. I recognize Representative Gathright for a motion.
I motion HB 46 ought to pass as amended.
Seconded by Representative Rhodes. Anyone want to discuss? I think we've covered it. Seeing none, I would ask the clerk to call the roll, and the motion on the floor is ought to pass as amended.
Vice Chairman Rhodes.
Yes.
Representative Pratt.
Yes.
Representative Hill.
Yes.
Representative Prue.
Yes.
Representative Janvrin.
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Stone.
Yes.
Representative Tenzar.
Yes.
Representative Gathright.
Yes.
Representative Muse.
Yes.
Representative Bolden.
Yes.
Representative Sue Newman.
Yes.
Representative Murphy.
Yes.
Representative Ray Newman.
Yes.
Representative Vale.
Yes.
Representative Newell.
Yes.
Representative Selig.
Yes.
Representative Wheeler.
Yeah.
Chairman Roy.
Chair votes yes. Unanimous.
20, yep, unanimous.
The motion carries unanimously, 20-0, and it will be sent for a recommendation ought to pass for a study. Any objection to consent? Seeing none, it will go on consent. And I close the executive session on HB 46 and open the executive session on House Bill 106. Oh, excuse me, Act 78. And I recognize Representative Stone to make a motion again, House Bill 78.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to ITL House Bill 78.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Prue. Representative Stone, would you like to speak to your motion?
Mr. Chair, I would. During testimony, there was no convincing information provided that would justify this bill going forward. In addition, I'd like to make an example that currently the New Hampshire Attorney General has joined in 25 other states on a pistol brace issue that's currently done under rulemaking authority of the ATF. In addition, some of these rulemaking authorities and executive orders lack due process and proper court challenges.
Representative Prue, would you like to speak to your second?
Pretty much the same thing, that I've seen the ATF, just randomly change the rules, sometimes depending on what administration happens to be sitting in the big seat. So it's hard to keep up. 1 minute it's legal, then it's not legal, then it's legal again. So it's just gets very confusing. So I think if we can just be on a level plane, that would be better.
Thank you. I will say that this is not, in my opinion, partisan. I objected to the previous president making an executive order without due process to make a certain item illegal. It's since been overturned by the court. I object to this president and through the ATF making executive orders that don't go through due process. We have a problem, I believe, with the Congress abrogating its duties and delegating authority to these agencies to just make random rules. The one that Representative Stone just brought up with the pistol braces, the ATF specifically issued a letter saying that these were legal after an extensive study. Millions of them were sold, and then the ATF changed its mind and said they're no longer legal. And no matter how much money you invested, thousands of dollars into such a device, they said you can either turn it in or you can pay this new tax and keep it. And as the representative pointed out, over 20 states are filing a lawsuit against that. So I believe that this law was passed with the intent of protecting our citizens from this yo-yo effect of rulemaking from the federal government. But it is now open for further discussion. Representative Newman, you have a question? You want to speak?
Yeah, I just want to say I hear a lot of discussions about executive orders and administrative people and places changing rules. This is about laws. We pass laws here in this body. And I think that it's been passed in many other states. It has not been challenged constitutionally. It is constitutional for us to be able to go ahead and pass this law and wait, just like you're waiting for those court cases to finish. We would have to have the same thing. We would wait until they are challenged in court and they go to the Supreme Court, a Supreme Court which I think has a likelihood that maybe they will fail. Maybe they will say it's unconstitutional. And at that point, I will have to live with what the Constitution says today. But today, this is a bill that prevents harm. And it prevents harm in a lot of places. And it is the harm that it prevents is having people commit suicide. So that when we're on the okay.
Everything you said is well taken, though.
Can I, yes, save that for the next one. And could I amend my remarks, Mr.
You may.
Chair? Thank you very much. I mentioned this before, so I don't have a lot to say. It's a nullification law, and it says we're not going to pay any money to that. So I'm against this law. Thank you. And sorry for the distraction and disruption and delay.
And we will save what you said for the next one. Anyone else? Representative Muse.
And just for the clarification of our audience at home, could you remind us which bill that we are on now?
HB 78.
If someone could remind me, that would be great. We are on House Bill 78 regarding repealing a previous bill we passed last year related to New Hampshire state law enforcement and federal firearms laws. Okay, having said, Representative Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm the prime sponsor of this bill, and I will say the reason why I filed it. The reason why I filed this bill is because of the conversations that, just as an example, the conversations that we had this morning over and over about relying on the federal government to control guns in our state. That's a quick summary according to me. So if that's not what I'm hearing, then please let me know. But I do think that with the confusion caused by this presidential and executive orders, we might be going after being able to limit that, but what we're actually doing is really tying the hands of law enforcement officers. We had an incident 2 years ago in Nashua behind the high school. We had a militia that was organizing, and with the laws that we have now on the books in New Hampshire, we wouldn't be able to ask those people to leave the school grounds. So this is one of the things where we have a lot of police presence, and we have people from all over the state trying to help us in Nashua. But really what we have to do is wait it out. So that's what we're doing for now. So my understanding is that under this law, and I have read several interpretations, that the federal laws that we're relying on cannot be enforced, and we cannot use any money to do that. So I oppose the ITL motion on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for joining our committee and sharing your opinion on that. Representative Harry Gathright.
I too will be voting against the ITL, and it actually this bill made me think about last term when there was a bill to take New Hampshire out of the Union. So I feel that this is just another piece of that, another way of coming in the back door to do the same thing. So that's it.
Thank you. I can't speak for anyone else on the committee, but I can tell you that as chairman, I would never support that notion. We are part of the union. And furthermore, this bill, or that we're trying to repeal, just to be clear, because there's some confusion in the public and among people, a New Hampshire law enforcement officer cannot enforce federal law. He just can't. It's prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. So the question is do we? They already can't with this law or not. So to the point the representative made about people at school, New Hampshire law enforcement can't enforce federal law, whether we say they can or they can't. It's prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. It has to be a federal agent. The law that we passed was carefully vetted by the Attorney General's office. We heard no testimony from law enforcement saying, you got to repeal this. It's stopping us. It just keeps New Hampshire taxpayer money and our law enforcement focused on New Hampshire laws and not being part of task force and things of this nature related to these issues we're talking about that keep changing, related to executive orders and things of this nature by these agencies at the federal level. We have enough to do enforcing our own laws as far as I'm concerned. Representative Mannion, did you have a question? Did you want to speak? Okay, all right. Any further discussion? Representative Salik.
Thank you. I just would point out that we swore an oath and a vow to uphold the U.S. Constitution as well as the New Hampshire Constitution. And this is a law that says that we're going to disregard federal rules. So I would not support, I don't support the ITL. I think we need to repeal the law because I think that having state laws that say we are not going to follow federal laws is a contradiction.
Thank you, Representative Selig, and I would agree with you, but that's not what this law does. It doesn't say we don't agree with or refuse to enforce federal law. We already can't enforce federal law. New Hampshire law enforcement cannot enforce a federal law. This law were repealed, that would not change. They still can't. You have to be a federal officer to enforce federal law, because if you were a New Hampshire police officer and you arrested someone for a violation of federal law, where would you take them? You can't take them to the courthouse. You can't be heard there. It's got to be prosecuted by the U.S. attorney. And if you're not a sworn federal agent, you can't even prosecute it. And the U.S. attorney's probably going to charge you. Representative Jambrin.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you recall, there was a law passed by the House, well, it's law now, that allows Border Patrol agents and Customs and Border Patrol and all those folks in the North Country to enforce state law. So there was a law enabling that. Again, our state law enforcement officers are not federal law enforcement officers and have no jurisdiction to enforce federal law, unless.
That's correct. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you down there, Representative Muse.
That's okay. one of the things that I wanted to mention in the context of this is while the current law, I think we heard testimony, hasn't really had much of an effect or an impact at all in New Hampshire. What it does do is it lays the framework for changes that could have a much greater impact and much more severe consequences. And I think we're sort of seeing the fruits of that with a couple of bills that are kind of come before us a little bit later today. This bill, when it was presented to us last year, I think many people thought it was a bad idea. We were going too far. There were things that were done at the last minute to pare it back a little bit. And it made it a little bit more palatable. But the bottom line is that we have a national crisis when it comes to gun violence and violence in our communities and the hazards of firearms in our schools and in public places, and by chilling the ability of local and state and federal officials to cooperate on investigations like this, it could potentially have impact, especially if we expand it. Simply, beyond things like firearms trafficking and enforcement of gun laws, into other areas where we really would like to see cooperation between federal and state officials, because it benefits New Hampshire to have federal and state cooperation around things like the enforcement of our laws around fentanyl and around illegal narcotics. So the bottom line is I support the move, or actually I will oppose the ITL, and I ask for the support of other folks on the committee as well.
Thank you, Representative Muse. I would just like to say one more thing. I was struck by Representative Selig, I believe it was on another bill, said something about the safety and worries hiring guards at her synagogue, and that's well taken. With regard to this bill and our law enforcement cooperating with federal, I myself am a Catholic and I enjoy the Latin Mass. I think it's beautiful. Having said that, I recently discovered that, according to the FBI, that might make me and the rest of my parishioners questionable. I don't want New Hampshire law enforcement involved in that any more than I would want them involved in looking at your synagogue as something. Like I said, the federal law just seems to be, at the current time, on a seesaw, and we want some stability. With that, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
We are voting on HB 78 with the move to ITL. Vice Chair Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Janbrin,
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
No.
Representative Muse,
No.
Representative Bolden,
No.
Representative Sue Newman,
No.
Representative Murphy,
No.
Representative Ray Newman,
No.
Representative Vale,
No.
Representative Newell,
No.
Representative Selig,
No.
Representative Wheeler,
Yes.
and Chairman Roy.
Chair votes yes.
19 to 11, 9.
Motion passes inexpedient to legislate with an 11-9 vote. I hereby close the executive session. And I open the executive session on House Bill 106. And I recognize Representative Me to make a motion. I move that this bill is inexpedient to legislate.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Representative Rhodes. I will speak to my motion. This is probably one of the most controversial of the bills that are before us today. And it's controversial because both sides have a very, very compelling argument. The ability to protect someone for or prevent someone from committing a crime or a violent act before they do it is just would be awesome and amazing. Unfortunately, in my opinion, violating people's due process rights is not the balance on that test is in my opinion is not in the favor of passing this law. Saying to someone based on someone else saying that they believe the person to be a danger in and of itself is a danger to our society. Today, you know, one group may say this person's a danger. Tomorrow, another group may say a different kind of person's a danger. And having their weapons seized, their right to protect themselves and their families and property seized, putting the burden on them to prove that they are not mentally ill or dangerous, puts the entire history of our Constitution on its head, making people prove that they're able to have a right that they already in the Constitution says they have. That balance test, in my mind, fails. And with that, I open the discussion. Representative Newman.
Could I just make a, don't want to get away. I'd like to have the clerk repeat the vote on the last one. I believe she said 11 to 8.
11-9.
11-9, thank you.
Did you want to speak on this while I have you?
Well, I think I did partially.
Would you like to reiterate your previous comments?
I'll just say that extreme risk protection orders are helpful because if someone in a family or relative, whoever the people are that are allowed to make a request for an extension for an order, they pretty much know whether the person presents a danger to themselves or others. And it's not just a simple, it's just don't write that down and hand it to somebody. They usually, law enforcement shows up, they take a statement under oath, and then it has to go to a court, so it's ex parte. The individual that they are saying should not have access to weapons is not there. And in Supreme Court cases, it has said that when there is a governmental need and there is a short period of time involved, that an ex parte hearing fulfills all the requirements of due process. So therefore, I believe this constitutional. I say it's a good thing, and I will give, since we've heard stories about anecdotal stories. I have a relative that was a police officer who was opposed to every single kind of law that would ever take any weapon away from anybody. And I asked him about this law, and he said he was in favor of it, and it was because he did not want. He was glad that a situation had happened and they had used the extreme risk protection order laws. And his comment to me, which surprised me immensely, was, I wanted to not have that person have access to those weapons because I didn't want to be standing here tomorrow as he tried to commit suicide by cop. And that just surprised me, and I just put that out there for information. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Representative Newman. Representative Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I recognize that there's probably not anything that anybody's going to say in this committee today that's going to change anybody's mind. What I would like to say is it is unfortunate that if this were to become law, the abuse that can be had by this, and a perfect example is a very bad divorce going very, very wrong. And I actually know of a perfect example of this where a wife, unfortunately, was not getting what she thought she should. And the husband was an avid hunter. He, at the time, had custody of the children. And there's some very bad things that happened to him because of that. And as much as I can understand the fear as a parent and a child that you believe is suicidal, that is just a thought that nobody should ever have to go through. And I recognize that, unfortunately, as parents, we do have to sometimes go through that. But I also have to say that there is nowhere else in the law do we take away somebody's rights just simply out of fear of something that somebody may say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Newell.
I do think that this one is a balance, but I just want to contribute a little bit to the conversation in that I just keep coming back to this phone call from a friend of mine in a domestic violence situation, calling me and telling me that she was at the point where she was trying to hide the guns because she needed to leave. And I mean, I hopped on a plane, let's be real, you know? But the bar for someone to deal with a domestic violence situation is it's very difficult for someone to get help in that situation. And I think that, you know, at the end of the day, I'm going to err on the side of, you know, someone being able to get that help more easily. So.
Thank you. I would just point out for the committee and for the representative, currently under the domestic violence laws, you can get an order, a protective order, and part of the order is to confiscate all firearms of the person who is the subject of the order. So we currently have that in law. This would expand that dramatically to a whole bunch of people who can just say that I know this person and they're not acting quite right and I'm worried that they may be a danger, and having their firearms seized before they even get a say. And it's just, again, I go back to, in my mind, it turns the Constitution on its head and says, prove you're a worthy citizen and then you can have your rights. And in my mind, that is just, that's just a bridge too far. Although I agree with everything said about it would be great if we could, but it's also, in my mind, we can't and shouldn't. Sometimes just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Representative Muse, and then Representative Janvert, and then Representative Bolden.
I wanted to point out that the reason for this bill isn't to make sure that people who may have fear of another person have some sort of recourse or some sort of legal channel for that fear. This bill is expressly designed to deal with situations where a person is an imminent threat to themselves or to others. One of the things that we went through when we considered this bill in a prior session, and there were several of us on the committee that was actually on the subcommittee that worked on this bill after it was retained over the course of the summer. One of the things I think that we all learned working together, and it was a subcommittee made up of Republicans, Democrats. I think one thing that we agreed on is that we were going to have to agree to disagree on in some areas, but I think that there was agreement around moving things like the burden of proof that's required in certain situations under the bill. I think that where we wound up, which is the bill that we have now, is much more protective of property rights than where we originally started with the bill 3 years ago. Getting back to something that I said earlier, every time we do this, we learn things, and if we get a chance, we can apply those learnings and we can make the legislation better. What we have in front of us is very good, well-considered legislation that was the product of an incredible amount of time and effort. It was also subject to a huge amount of review by legal and constitutional experts. We are on solid ground with a law like this. These laws are already in effect in dozens of other states, including states like Florida. We would not be an outlier or constitutional rogues if we implemented a bill like this. What we would be are people who are smart enough, instead of reacting to something after the fact, as virtually every state legislature who has passed one of these bills has been in a situation where something terrible has happened, and in response to that, we feel like finally we need to act. The problem is we can't go back and save those people. So in essence, by letting this bill go, we're basically saying it's gonna take something like that happening in New Hampshire before we're willing to act. And what I would say is we have an opportunity to do something now, and we should take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Janvrin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill would try to take preemptive measures to keep somebody from harming others. So I would like to put this in a different context. We just had our Super Bowl last week, and your next door neighbor has a bunch of his friends over, and you see 2 or 3 of them through the window drinking alcohol. So you call the police and you say, listen, I think these folks might go out and drunk drive and cause an accident. So the police show up with 6 tow trucks and they take your cars away. And then you can't get the cars back until you've proven that you won't drink alcohol again. So that's what I liken this to. We're trying to tell people that a constitutionally protected right can be removed because your next door neighbor thinks that you could be a threat without any proof. And so I have a really hard time even conceiving that we're going to go out and preemptively try to stop crime from happening. So I'll be an ITL.
Representative Bolden. I'll come back to you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I missed a key piece of the conversation. I've been dealing with some health stuff and it's making me a little loopy. But I'm confused about the conversation around the idea that this limits liberties in some substantial way. It's a temporary experience. And consistently and historically in our country, in our system of government, we limit liberties on a temporary basis in the interest of justice and safety. And I think some examples are, the First Amendment, in court, if the judge feels that you're, as a defendant, maybe behaving inappropriately, they can limit your ability to talk to the media, or if they can seal a case and limit your ability to speak publicly on that case. And specifically in law in New Hampshire, in the family court system, when there's a particular type of case, it's a misdemeanor for the parents involved, sort of the defendants involved in the family court case, to communicate with the media at all. And is that not a First Amendment issue? But for whatever reason, it was felt appropriate to have rules along those lines to further the goals, the overarching goals. And so there is no sense, I think legislators should know, if anyone, that there is no sense that the First Amendment is this hard, fast rule. And we regularly make exceptions to it. And when you're talking about the Fourth Amendment, we just had legislation about the topic that Fish and Game doesn't need a warrant. We just live in that reality. We have so many exceptions to what we teach high schoolers or middle schoolers are hard and fast rules in our society. And it seems counterintuitive to argue that this is the one time that we can't make an exception when we live in a world of exceptions. And I think the bail system in general is like the biggest exception I can think of, where you're not convicted, you're not a criminal under the law, but you're sitting in jail, not because you're found guilty, but because you haven't even faced trial yet. So it's confusing to me that this would be the one thing where we can't operate with the same exceptions that we apply to so many other essential liberties like speech and literally freedom itself, when you're talking about putting someone in behind bars when they haven't faced trial and are criminally considered innocent.
Thank you. I would point out that in the bail situation, the defendant is allowed, prior to the bail being set and again after the bail is set, to be present for the hearing setting his bail and make arguments in his own defense. And as far as shortly pausing a liberty in the interest of safety, it's a little more complicated than that because you're not pausing it, you're taking it away. You're actually ripping it out of their house. You're going to someone's house who may have a gun collection worth tens of thousands of dollars, and you're going into their house, into their home, into their inner sanctum, and tearing their property away from them and saying, if you want this, come to court and prove you can have it. That, in my mind, is a bridge too far. Representative Meese, you wanted to respond to Representative Jammern's comments?
I just wanted to say that there's nothing in this law that allows law enforcement to do anything without proof. Proof is an important part of the process. Affidavits need to be filled out and filed, even if it's an ex parte process. If you are found later on to have falsely filed a report under this bill, that is a criminal offense that will be punished. Every step of the way, you know, if you actually go through the text of the bill, one of the things that you see are rigorous evidentiary standards. Not only to get a temporary order, but also to get a permanent order. I think another thing that we hear a lot is that this amounts to confiscation of property. The property is not confiscated. The property remains under the ownership of the person who it is temporarily taken from. It does not become state property. It doesn't go up for auction. It doesn't go up for sale. It remains your property until the order expires or until you file a motion. One of the things that's in the provision too, or a provision in the bill, is that if you're a respondent in one of these orders and a permanent order has been issued against you, you have the ability to go and file a motion at any period of time before the end of the order that would allow your case to be reheard. So there are actually, if you read it, and one of the reasons why it's such a long bill is because there are so many things that are done to properly balance the protection that it offers to potential victims along with the property rights and the constitutional rights of the respondent. So, I object to, I think it's very easy with something this long and this complex to frame it as doing things that it simply doesn't do. And what I would suggest to everyone, regardless of how you feel about this, please take time to read the bill. It's a pretty damn good bill. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been brought to my attention that I'm missing the right side of the room. So, Representative Murphy.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill creates what we know is it's a temporary restriction on a person's access to their firearms. If the civil court judge finds by clear and convincing evidence that a person poses a significant danger of using firearms to harm themselves or others. This bill passed both chambers in 2019, 2020 before being vetoed. And as chair of the subcommittee that heard this bill during that session, I know it includes the input and edits from a number of stakeholders. This process ensures that a limited number of people are able to bring this forward, and that would include family members, those living within the household, and law enforcement. This is a tool, this is a tool that we have for law enforcement. This is a tool for families to save their loved ones' lives. It allows a short-term ERPO can only last 5 days in cases of imminent danger. Long-term orders can be longer, but it's only that occurs only after a full hearing. Gun violence tragedies, mass shootings, gun suicides, they're often preceded by red flags. We see them. It's happening. It's happening. These are warning signs of threats that we have to start doing something differently about. This life-saving tool can help to prevent warning signs from escalating into tragedy. One of the concerns is that ERPOs don't have due process, and I suggest that that's false. This bill contains a brief ex parte process to ensure firearms are removed quickly in cases where there's an imminent risk of harm. But that order lasts no more than 5 days. As someone who worked in child protection years ago, I know we utilize ex parte orders to remove children from imminent danger. A hearing was, followed, as would in this case. There are no anonymous petitioners, and the burden of proof is pretty high. As far as taking ERPOs being filed for revenge purposes, I think Representative Muse spoke to, statements under oath, false statements under oath. That's a crime, and there are penalties for that. Passing HB 106, I just think it's time. This tool will provide us a way to prevent the gun suicide and mass shootings. It was mentioned prior that we can't predict someone's mental health, but I'd suggest that though it's true we can't always be certain of the actions those in crisis will take, those of us who've worked in mental health, in the mental health field, or have loved ones with mental health challenges, we recognize that there are definitely times when there can be observable signs of suicide risk. Passing an ERPO law here can reduce a suicidal person's access to firearms and save those lives. I just want to end on, in the words of a New Hampshire citizen who reached out to us on the committee, while embracing the vision of personal rights, this must be tempered by our responsibilities to each other as a civil society. We must do what we can to help stop gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. Representative Newell, did you? Okay.
That was supposed to say Newman.
Oh, Representative Newman.
I can add nothing to the excellent summary that my colleague over here had made, and it's a result of all the activity that we went through, because I was a member of that subcommittee. We went through every single line, and it passed it went where it went. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Newman. Representative Salik.
Thank you. Sorry, school nurse. I'll call back in a moment. So I would just say, Representative Murphy said most of what I intended to say. And the other thing is that in Florida, which is a state we know tends to swing in a different direction than I do, they actually have a similar law to this. And just last year, they used it and stopped a school shooting. They had a young person who was out of the schools and was demonstrating and posting a number of comments. They were able to go and ultimately take possession of things. They determined he was in fact a significant threat, and they worked through the process to secure the weapons and prevent another school shooting. If someone is inconvenienced for 4 or 5 days while we ensure that they're mentally well, but that saves the lives of 5 kids, is that worth it? 10 kids? How many kids do we have to lose before it's worth saying, I'm really sorry, but you have to be inconvenienced for 5 days while we make sure you're mentally stable enough to have this weapon?
That's certainly a interesting question, worthy of debate. Again, I would go back to I recall a movie. It was called The Minority Report, and where they were able to predict crime in the future, and they would arrest people for crimes they hadn't committed, but they knew they were going to commit, and that didn't end well. Our Constitution, like it or leave it, says clearly these are your rights. And to the comment that it doesn't interfere with due process, I would respectfully disagree. You do get due process only after your property has been seized and your home violated. And the due process is you come prove to us that you're equal to every other citizen in the country. And that, to me, is wrong. Representative Sue Newman.
Yes, thank you. And I hope for the benefit of the committee, I will try and not repeat so much of the good things that have already been said. But what I did say last week that I will repeat is I am so sorry. We all are probably sorry that we cannot legislate good behavior. So bad behavior is out there. And I think that this bill, which because of last week, I had looked it over quite a bit. people busted their chops to try and get it right, to cover everything. 19 states have it. It apparently remains constitutional. Weapons aren't seized. They're confiscated for a period of time until they get back. And as for people, it was mentioned earlier about background checks and being adjudicated and whatever. The example I used last week was the person who was not adjudicated of anything, but due to circumstances that were going on in their life, was absolutely going haywire at the time. And when people knew it and knew that he or she was trying to get a gun, wouldn't have been a good thing, so that things to him, family members, or whatever wouldn't happen. Florida has been mentioned a few times, and I think it was brought up last week at the hearing. The Florida red flag law was put into effect after the Stoneham Douglas shooting, and recent events that have been publicized and broadcast about. I have not heard any expert on any channel that has refuted that refuted the fact that signs are always there when somebody is looking to. Maybe you did. Oh, okay. That signs are always, almost all, I will qualify it, almost always evident with somebody. So if you can do something before something happens in New Hampshire where now somebody is scrambling to get a law into effect, I would think that's a better thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Newman. I got to tell you, I'm pleased to see my colleagues' newfound love of the Florida legislative process. I wonder if it applies quite broadly. But having said that, this is New Hampshire, and other states do what the other states are going to do, and we don't do what we do because other states do it. We do what we do because our constituents ask for it or don't. And it's clear that at least half of the constituents in here want this, and the other half don't. I would point out that of the years I've been here, I have never gotten as much constituent email as I did on this. I think it's somewhere over 2,000 emails, people asking, please do not pass this bill. Regardless of the impetus for that, I just thought it was worthy of recognizing for the behalf of all those people that took the time to send us an email, that we do see those and we do take those into account. Whether or not we're able to respond to all several thousand of you is a different question. Having said that, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now voting on House Bill 106 with the move to ITL. Vice Chair Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
I have to say I'm a little conflicted, but it's going to be a yes.
Representative Janbrin,
Yes.
Representative Mannion,
Yes.
the clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
No.
Representative Muse,
No.
Representative Bolden,
No.
Representative Sue Newman,
No.
Representative Murphy,
No.
Representative Ray Newman,
No.
Representative Vale,
No.
Representative Newell,
No.
Representative Selig,
No.
Representative Wheeler,
Yeah.
and Chairman Roy.
Chair votes yes.
So we have 11 to 9.
The motion of inexpedient to legislate carries with a vote of 11 to 9. And I hereby close the public hearing on HB 106. And I recognize Representative Muse for a motion on House Bill 351.
Mr. Chair, I would like to move Amendment 2023-0555H, amendment to HB 31FM.
Do I have a second on the move for the motion? Seconded by Representative Harriet Gathright. Would you like to speak to your motion, Representative?
Yes. What this amendment does is it amends the bill to remove the original requirement from HB 351 that a locking firearms device or a locking safety device be included in the sale of all firearms in New Hampshire. Well, I think that's a really good idea. We did hear testimony from people who thought that the added expense of that could constitute the equivalent of an unfunded mandate for an individual. And I do believe that there's another part of the bill that is much more important for us to pass, and that is the second part of the bill that actually would significantly strengthen New Hampshire's firearms negligence law involving children. Currently, if a child gains access to an unsecured firearm, the penalty for the firearm owner only takes effect if should the firearm be used in a reckless or threatening manner, should it be used during the commission of a crime, or if it's negligently discharged. So basically, to constitute negligence of any kind, almost the worst possible thing needs to happen, and even if that happens, our law limits our recourse to a violation and a $1,000 fine. I think we've all heard of incidents where somebody's kids go over to another kid's house, a parent leaves a gun unsecured, the gun goes off, and either the child who lives in the home or that one of the child's friends is severely injured, sometimes even killed. These incidents do happen in New Hampshire. We tend not to hear about them a lot because they rarely make the media, and when they do make the media, because they involve minors, they tend to disappear. We don't actually keep any kind of a statewide record of these incidents, but the bottom line is we know they're happening. We had one a few years ago up in the Lakes region where a young man gained access to his parents' unsecured firearm and murdered both of his parents. So you know, these are things that do happen, and I think what this bill would not do is penalize a law-abiding gun owner in any way. Negligence is already a crime in New Hampshire. What it would do is send a clearer message to people that we are committed to enforcing this policy. We are committed to the safety of children, and that if you leave a firearm unsecured in a place where a child can gain access to it, there will be more severe consequences than there are now. So I'm hoping that this is an amendment that we all can support, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions folks have about it.
Representative Muse, I have a question, if you could. And I'm going to just say what I think, and you tell me if I'm incorrect. So this law does not mandate any type of locking, securing, providing any kind of locks. All it says is that if a minor gets a firearm because you didn't lock it and it's loaded or there's ammunition available, then and the minor does any of the listed things with the firearm, you would be guilty of a misdemeanor. And if the child hurts somebody with that, it would be a Class B felony. Is that a correct?
That is correct. And one of the other things in the amendment is the original language says shall be a Class B felony. I changed that to may be a Class B felony because I think these are cases, looking at it again, that do require discretion on the part of the court. And I would like the court to have that discretion. The one thing I would like to point out is that something that remains in the statute that has not been changed, but a parent or guardian of a child who's injured or dies as a result of an accidental shooting shall be prosecuted only in instances where the parent or guardian behaved in a grossly negligent manner. That is an extremely high standard of proof. We understand that a potential legal charge is probably the last thing on the mind of a parent that's lost their child because of this, and we understand that it is important to recognize that in addition to an act of negligence, there's a huge loss that's taken place on the part of the parent. So the bill doesn't change that language. All it does essentially is to put some teeth into a law that needs a few more teeth. And I hope it's something we can agree on.
Thank you. This time I'm going to call a 5-minute recess. Ask the Republicans to join me in my office.
I'm just gonna wait till you guys finish.
You think I'm kidding, but there's a hole in this floor. In the wheel, it's stuck in it. It never comes. Well, I try not to, but yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to reopen the public executive session of House Bill. What is this one? 351. At this point, after discussion with the sponsor and members, I'm going to recess this session, and we are going to take it up again tomorrow after we make a couple tweaks to it. If that's okay with everyone. Actually, even if it's not, I'm still recessing it. At that point, I'm going to open the public hearing on House Bill 444. Yeah, executive session. Thank you, Representative Hill. I want to get that correct. And I recognize Representative Mannion for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to ITL this.
Second.
Representative Mannion, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would. This is again infringing on people's rights to carry firearms, whether it's at a polling place or at the supermarket or anywhere else. We've seen no evidence that there's been any issues with people being armed at polling places. A lot of times you wouldn't even know it, but for those reasons, I would support an ITO.
Representative Prue, would you like to speak to your motion? Or your second?
Yes, I would. Yep. So again, this is another carve out where I cannot continue with my rights because I'm going to do another one of my rights. I'm kind of having trouble with that, so I'm going to ITL this.
Thank you. I'll open the open the discussion. I understand. I think the goal of this is that at a polling place, you shouldn't be intimidated on how you're going to vote. I haven't heard that has been an issue in New Hampshire. Furthermore, with regard to many polling places are in schools, and as such, anyone coming to the polls, even if the school is closed for voting, still has to comply with the federal law that says you can't carry a firearm at a school if you don't have a license to carry. And I would encourage our law enforcement to enforce that law that already is on the books. But I wholeheartedly agree with Representative Prue's very succinct reading of it is I have to give up another one of my rights while I'm exercising the other right. Again, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know what it would stop. Where's the balance on that? What is the public safety interest versus telling people you can't come in here or with a firearm on? I haven't seen any issues in New Hampshire at polls. I watched those pretty closely, and I just haven't seen it. So, further discussion, Representative Newell.
I agree, and the concerns that you voiced were the same concerns that I had. But in the interest of really trying to reach out and see why this was necessary, I did hear a variety of stories of people being intimidated in that way. So, I mean, especially if it is something that is already on the books and then is being just reinforced by state law, I don't see the harm in that.
Thank you. It would not be just reinforced though, because you can, if that's only with regard to the school, and you can still do it with a license to carry, this would actually take that away, and it's further than, and that's only with regard to the schools. And if you do have examples of people being intimidated, and it was New Hampshire, I'd love to hear those. Representative Jamber.
Certainly Attorney General as well. I actually looked at the exceptions here, and I'll read it from the bill. The provisions of RSA 159-27 shall not apply to law enforcement officers on duty at the polling place or to uniformed officers while they are exercising their right to vote, or to a person who secures an unloaded firearm in a motor vehicle. I have a problem with that, and here's why. Several times I have served as an elected constable for the town of Seabrook. I am currently on the ballot for March 14th to also take that office again. The office of a constable actually is subject to direction by the moderator at the polling place. The constable is not a uniformed police officer, and they are not considered a law enforcement officer on duty because they're an elected position. So there's no carve out for a constable to be present at the polling place and be armed and to be called upon by the moderator to do his job. He's still not on duty until he's called upon to do so. So because that is not carved out, I'm against the bill.
Okay, and no problem with the shameless plug for your reelection. Representative Salick.
So I just want to point out, we just voted down a bill that would allow local and state police to enforce the federal gun-free school zone laws. So we're saying our local and state police can't enforce these laws. I guess the one federal agent that we have for Maine and New Hampshire and part of Massachusetts could go to every polling place in a quick circuit and hope that he can reach all of them while there are people violating these laws when the guns are in school zones. The New Hampshire Attorney General's office says state and local authorities can't prevent people from bringing guns into polling places, even those located in school zones, as gun-free school zones are a matter of federal law. So we're making contradictory statements in our own committee about which laws, or maybe cherry picking which laws to enforce and which laws not to enforce, and claiming, well, we don't need this because the federal law says this, but yet we're also not going to do anything to reinforce and support federal law.
Thank you. That was somewhat incorrect. New Hampshire police officers in no universe can, regardless of what laws we pass, enforce federal law. We could actually repeal the bill we passed last year and put in a new bill that says New Hampshire police can enforce all the federal laws. It would have zero effect because under the United States laws and Constitution, we can't do that. We have no control over that. It's only federal officers that can do that. Now, I guess New Hampshire laws, certain ones, law enforcement officers could be dual sworn, which I believe does occur. And we have some who are on task force and things with them who wouldn't be affected by that because they're already sworn federal agents. But New Hampshire law enforcement, state, local, fish, whatever, cannot enforce federal law unless they are sworn federal officers, because only the United States Attorney can prosecute federal crimes. So we're not talking out of both sides of our mouth. What we're saying is New Hampshire law enforcement can't enforce federal law. This section, as federal law, is the only law that, and this isn't only about schools, by the way, this is about all polling places, but with regard to the school, if it's a polling place, what I was pointing out is that the law that requires people to have a license to carry a firearm to go into the polling place still exists. And even if the school is closed, New Hampshire law enforcement could never enforce that anyway because they're not federal agents. It's a federal law. If, to your point, the federal government decided to staff that up and start patrolling all the schools, they're the only ones who could prosecute that. You may respond.
I just want to say, so we have federal law that says to keep guns out of polling places, and you've just said, and we have voted against adding any state laws to reinforce federal laws or to parallel them, as the term might be. So unless we pass a state law, there is going to continue to be no enforcement. We're going to continue to have risk. The chair also earlier asked about people who felt intimidated by guns at polling places. I will tell you, I am one of those people who has felt intimidated at a polling place because of people coming in with their guns, both when I was working as a town sworn election official and when I was there on my own as an individual to vote. I am someone who personally chooses not to carry. I have no desire to own a gun because I am well aware of my own physical incompetence and the likelihood I'd be much more likely to shoot myself than to do any good to anyone else. But the reality is that when someone came up to me and it was clear that he was carrying, even though it might be concealed, that when he came up and I had to ask him for his ID based on another law that was passed, and his response was to thrust his hip at me and say, I don't really need to show you expletive, that I certainly felt intimidated. And it was because I was sitting next to someone else who was able to contact our local our police officer who came over and proceeded to stand there and then escort this person through the premises. But if you're asking about people feeling intimidated by people carrying, yeah, I felt intimidated. Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That is regrettable. And it sounds like that person was pretty close to the brandishing law, which would make him a criminal. Representative Salick, excuse me, Bolden.
You can just call me Salick B. Thank you. On the topic of giving up a right to exercise a right, we already have laws in place in New Hampshire that are enforced that prohibit electioneering in a polling place. And if memory serves, I think I missed the exec on the chest bill, but if memory serves, it was maybe last year or maybe the election in 2021 when someone tried to vote at a polling station in a town somewhere, and they were wearing a shirt that advocated for a candidate, and they were told they could not wear the shirt in the polling station, and this person took off her shirt and proceeded to vote because one was legal and the other one wasn't. And so she complied to the extent that she voted topless, and I think maybe hadn't worn a bra that day. But anyway, so there's an established precedent for requiring you to give up some rights in order to exercise another right. So I don't understand the logic in that argument. And that's also and chiefly an issue of voter intimidation. And without a doubt, I think in my own polling station, given what I know of my own constituency, I have strong feelings about the presence of police at the entrance to the polling station. I understand their function and that they're trying to prevent, they want to be available in case there's any kind of conflict between voters or protesters or something. But every time they're there, I try to engage and see if there's a better place that we can put them so that they can serve their purpose, but they don't seem to be gatekeeper. So that they don't give an impression that they're gatekeepers. And voter intimidation is and always should be front of mind when you're talking about the experience that someone has walking through a polling station. And that's why, masks were not a requirement. When we were going through the period of the majority of people wearing masks in public, polling stations were not requiring it because you need to be able to feel comfortable voting and not feel pressured to vote a particular way when you're going in. And so I think that it's always important to make sure that the experience of the voter going in is designed to remind them that they do have the right to vote as they please and that they maintain their right to vote. But I think it's also worth mentioning that not all polling stations are in schools. Manchester has 12 polling stations, and 2 of them, off the top of my head, are in churches. And I don't know that they're anywhere near schools. So it does seem like there's room for this kind of a proposal in our current election process in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you. I would respond with regard to the logic. I think that there's a big difference between me not being able to wear my Tippecanoe and Tyler 2 shirt to vote versus carry a firearm to protect myself. If I am not allowed to wear my T-shirt, I might get chilly. If I can't carry my firearm, I may be killed. There's a difference. But I like your thinking, and I would be happy to co-sponsor a bill in September that relates to voter intimidation, whether it be with a firearm or something else. What Representative Salick happened, in my mind, should be highly illegal. What you said happened to you. And if it's not already illegal enough, we can stiffen that penalty. Representative Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to point out that criminal threatening is illegal in the state of New Hampshire, and the mere act of bearing your arm is not, if you're doing that in a peaceful manner, that is not and should not be illegal, regardless of where you are.
I don't think that sounded peaceful, what she said, she described. Representative Muse.
I would just like to point out that there already are places in New Hampshire where we do not allow firearms. Those are our courts. We do not allow you to take a firearm into a court with very good reasons. And there are many states who feel that polling places and other public places actually fall into the same category. The Supreme Court has recognized in the Heller decision the ability of states to do this. So nothing about doing this is inconsistent, is unconstitutional, or is bad public safety policy. This is one more thing that we can do to reduce the risk of, in this case, not only gun violence or accidental discharge of a firearm, but it's one more thing that we can do to ensure that people feel comfortable, that they feel safe and secure when they're exercising one of their most important rights as Americans, which is the right to vote. And in New Hampshire, we consume a lot of oxygen talking about our elections, the importance of our elections, the integrity of our elections. Bringing a firearm into a polling place is a way potentially of exerting control, exerting influence around somebody else's decision. It's something that can that I know has kept some people from voting. I know in my own town in Portsmouth, when the Attorney General made his clarification a few years ago and said that yes, firearms are allowed in polling places under our law, we had several people who quit, and we had a hard time finding people to replace them. And we ask our poll workers to do a lot. We ask them to be at the polls in the time of a pandemic. We ask them to work incredibly long hours. We pass laws that make them accountable if they make mistakes. I think one thing that we could do that would make things a little bit easier for them is at least ensure that when they're doing their job and when they're helping the rest of us do helping the rest of us exercise our democratic rights, that they feel relatively safe in doing so. And I think introducing a firearm into that situation changes that. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to respectfully disagree. When I go someplace and I see that people are carrying lawfully, and if there's officers there, that gives me a sense of safety. My first feeling is not fear and worry. My feeling's like, phew, if something happens, we're covered. So I think it's a matter of perception and tomato. But from my perspective, I feel safer knowing that we are not a soft target and that there are people there willing and trained to keep us safe. Thank you.
Representative Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two places in New Hampshire that don't allow firearms are prisons and courthouses. And the reason for that is you have prisoners there that could cause concern over the issues of escape. Going forward with the polling places, you have a moderator there that controls the elections at a polling place. If there's an issue, any citizen can contact the moderator, and the moderator finds it necessary, they can contact law enforcement. At least in my community, we have law enforcement that rove in and out of the polling locations nonstop. It's very common to see people with firearms showing up to vote. Maybe I'm fortunate because in our community, we have less than 10 minutes, you're in and out. It's not a significant amount of time to be hanging out. So I guess I really don't see the issue with trying to restrict someone for about 10 minutes of poll time.
Thank you. Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of these have been hard votes for me, and I understand where people are coming from on this end, and I am not someone who at all, I don't think anyone here on this committee wants gun violence or is heartened by the news stories that we're seeing on the news and the horrific nature of the crimes that we're seeing. I'm not sure that legislation like what we have before us, specifically for these polling place legislation, is the way to move forward. I don't think we're elected to legislate based off of how comfortable people are feeling. I think, like Representative Reed said, some people are comforted by other people having a weapon. So the simple act of having a weapon on your holster in a polling place, while that might make someone feel uncomfortable, given the news stories that people are hearing, is not reason enough to restrict someone from being allowed to carry that weapon into the polling place when they vote. And we heard from a lot of people that if this was allowed, if this passed, that they would just leave their gun in the car or they just would not come. So to Representative Muse's point about people not voting because there potentially could be guns on someone else's hip, What about the people who might not vote because they're not allowed to bring their gun into the polling place? So there's parallel arguments that could be made to all of this, and I just think that we do not legislate based off of comfort. We legislate based off of what's good policy, and I do not see HB 444 as good policy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Mannion. Representative Mannion waves off. Representative Harriet Gathright.
I definitely will be voting for this bill. I approve it. Okay. One of the things that I see with this bill is intimidation, and I literally do. And every time that I'm at the polls and there's someone there, you can, whether they're showing their guns or if they're hidden, it doesn't matter because you can see that. And not just me, but there are other people that look like me have the same issues. It's like a hair stands up. And given what's going on across the United States and even what's going on here in New Hampshire when it comes to people of color, I don't believe that anyone should have any weapons there. There's a police officer at every polling place that I'm aware of, and that's enough.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Pratt.
Thank you for letting me speak. Looking at the bill itself, it says you will be guilty of a Class A misdemeanor if you carry a loaded or unloaded gun, if you open carry or you conceal carry, or whether you're licensed or unlicensed. So that means a person could be in violation of a Class B misdemeanor if they're carrying an unloaded pistol concealed with a New Hampshire license. And that's a total infringement on your Second Amendment rights. We can't protect people's feelings. Just a few months ago, a state representative felt intimidated by my hat. I mean, how far do we go? How far do we go? Where do we draw the line on how far do we go on people's rights? I will be voting against this bill for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Newell.
To your point, Representative Pratt, I would argue that, you know, we do have that. We do have that law that people cannot wear, you know, things that are, as Representative Bolton said earlier, things that are in, you know, having a candidate or something like that, that is already on the books. So, I mean, I think when we talk about, you know, legislating based on intimidation, it is kind of an extension of what we already have. So anyway.
Nobody. Okay. At this time, oh, Representative Newman. I did acknowledge him.
And the first thing I have is a question for the chair, and it was the point you made about that New Hampshire law enforcement officers cannot enforce federal law. I'm just wondering who enforces the law about not having weapons at the polls.
You mean at the schools? If
Yeah,
it's at a
no,
school?
I mean at courthouses. Let me just say
Oh,
that.
who enforces that?
Yeah.
The I believe it's the court security. It's a state law, so any state trooper, if it's in a municipality, any municipal officer.
But it's a state. I mean, okay, I'll let that go. The other thing I wanted to note is I mentioned the Supreme Court case that goes to school, no weapons in the schools and government places, and in that Supreme Court case, what they have to do is look at the historical record to see what it is, and they gave specific examples of things that are in the historical record that can be protected, and one of them was polling places, political gatherings.
I agree. That Supreme Court ruling did say that we could do that. And I guess my response would be what I said earlier. Sometimes just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. Representative Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in response to Representative Newman, the judicial branch has their own court security officers that have full powers of arrest at all our courts. And at the Superior Court level, it's done by the Sheriff's Office, which also has bailiffs.
Can I respond?
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
and I agree with you. And the courthouse does not have the same kind of federal law associated with it that it is. So Thank you for the clarification.
Representative Stone? Okay. I would just say that the courthouse is indeed is in law. The difference I see is that with the courthouse, oftentimes you are dealing with known criminals who have been convicted of violent crimes, and their potential to have their liberty taken for extended period of times oftentimes can drive emotions of them and their family members, and it's a lot more volatile situation than whether or not you're going to vote to increase the school budget. So again, it's nuanced, and both sides have a legitimate argument. Having said that, this time I'd ask the clerk to call the roll, unless I missed somebody else. Representative Proof, I missed you.
One thing I like to point out about courthouses that I see is everybody gets screened going into that building. So I'm pretty sure there's no other guns besides the law enforcement that's in there, and they're making a commitment of my security. When they take away my right to bear arms, they should be stepping up to say, I will be safe. And by screening everybody and making sure no other weapons come in, they're doing that. So that's the difference between courthouse and a polling place that I see.
Thank you. That is a very compelling point, that at the courthouse you are guaranteed at least safety from firearms because they've taken the extra steps to put the magnetometers and screen to, okay, you can't bring your gun in, but we're going to protect you by making sure no one else has one either. If we were to do this at a polling place, only the people that obeyed the law would have no guns, and the people that didn't would, which puts you at a disadvantage to a criminal who could have a firearm. At this point, I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now voting on HB 444 with the move to ITL. Vice Chair Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Absolutely.
Representative Janvrin,
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. The Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
No.
Representative Muse,
No.
Representative Bolden,
No.
Representative Sue Newman,
No.
Representative Murphy,
No.
Representative Ray Newman,
No.
Representative Vale,
No.
Representative Newell,
No.
Representative Selig,
No.
Representative Wheeler,
Yay.
and Chairman Roy.
Chair votes yes.
And that is 11 to 9.
The motion of inexpedient to legislate carries with a vote of 11 to 9. I hereby close the executive session, and I open the executive session on House Bill 474, and I recognize Representative Mannion to make a motion. Janvrin, is that who is? Wow. Representative Prue, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to ITL.
Second.
Motion made by Representative Prue, seconded by Representative Rhodes. Representative Prue, would you like to speak to your motion?
As soon as I can find the bill.
Take your time.
So yes, so this is the relative enforcement by federal firearms laws. Sorry, I wasn't planning on being the guy, but
Representative Mannion, would you like to, I know that you didn't make the motion. Did you say you wanted to add
I
something
could
to
speak
that?
on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
oh, okay, I
The
know which one.
specific issue with this bill is the penalties and the potential of qualified immunity being removed from law enforcement officers. I believe our local law enforcement should not be subject to the penalties that this bill puts in place. There are some felonies involved. There are costs, attorney costs for the person who is being investigated by the federal government, even though the law enforcement officer himself is not doing the investigation. And also, there are some due process issues with him being terminated immediately upon any kind of aid or assistance to federal law enforcement. So for those issues, I would recommend an ITL.
Thank you, Representative Mannion. Discussion? Anyone? See, everybody was ready for this bill. At this point, I would ask the clerk to call the roll. The motion on the floor is inexpedient to legislate.
We are voting on House Bill 474. Chairman Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Janvrin,
Yes.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
No.
Representative Muse,
Yes.
Representative Bolden,
Yes.
Representative Sue Newman,
Yes.
Representative Murphy,
No.
Representative Ray Newman,
Yes.
Representative Vale,
Yes.
Representative Newell,
Yes.
Representative Selig,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
No.
Chairman Roy.
I don't know. I don't know what just happened. I'm gonna vote. I'm gonna vote yes to the motion of ITL. I think. And what's the total?
474. I think so.
Representative here, Gathright, would you like to reconsider or change your vote? We appear to have stepped into the twilight zone on this bill.
Okay.
I think Representative Mannion's fault.
Wasn't the vote ITL?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I believe we were not surprised by the bill, but we were surprised by the motion in it. We were just completely discombobulated.
I will not take advantage of that. Yeah, okay, so we're gonna, I don't know, did the clerk leave? It would have been great. Will the clerk please recall the roll?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, a motion to reconsider has to pass at least 11 to 9.
To reconsider the vote?
Yeah, so I'll motion to reconsider.
Thank you.
Second.
All right.
Call the roll on the motion to reconsider.
Okay. So again, we are voting on House Bill 474. Reconsider Bill House 474. All right. Vice Chair Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Janvrin,
Yep.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
Mannion. The clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright, Representative Muse,
Yes.
Representative Bolden,
Yes.
Representative Sue Newman,
Yes.
Representative Murphy,
Yes.
Representative Vale, Ray Newman,
Representative Newman votes yes.
Representative Vale,
Vale votes yes.
Representative Newell,
Yes.
Representative Selig,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yes.
and Chairman Roy,
Chair definitely votes yes this time.
20 to 0.
And the motion of inexpedient to legislate passes.
Reconsider.
Motion to reconsider. Let's do this again. Now that the motion to reconsider is on the table, it's open for new motions, and I recognize Representative Mannion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My recommendation is to ITL this bill, just so everyone.
Sec-
Yeah, go ahead.
Second, anyone second?
Second.
Second, Representative Prue. Representative Mannion, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. For clarification, I don't know if this caused some issues with it. I am not the sponsor of this bill, even though the name is the same. So I'm going to put that out to begin with. The section of this bill, while I understand the intent of it is to give it some teeth, I don't think creating penalties for our local law enforcement just because they assist or aid federal law enforcement in their duties, penalties up to be felonies, paying for lawyer fees, immediate termination, which can cause some due process issues. I don't think that part of the bill I support. So it needs some work, and for that reason, I would support an ITL.
Representative Prue, would you like to speak to your second?
Wouldn't say it needs some work. I would say it needs a lot of work. That instant firing, because they're required at least to maybe show up with their blue lights. Is that considered assisting them? When that's part of their public safety duties, is to make sure everybody's safe, including the public, when these federal operations are happening. So to say that we can't go and assist them to make our people safe with these big fines and penalties is just way too far. So, yep, ITL.
I would just add for like a real world scenario. The federal government raided, whether you agree with it or not, the home of the former president, and there was a whole contingent of federal officers that raided it, and the local police, because it attracted a crowd, had to keep the crowd back because even they didn't know what was going on. So under this bill, I believe we would be charging the local officers because they were there for the reason of that. It just does not make any sense, and to me it smacks of some kind of anti-law enforcement, and I'll never support that in this committee. Anyone else? Having seen none, please call the roll this time. What the motion is inexpedient to legislate.
And this is for House Bill 474. Vice Chairman Rhodes,
Yes.
Representative Pratt,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Prue,
Yes.
Representative Janvrin,
Aye.
Representative Mannion.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Stone,
Yes.
Representative Tenzar,
Yes.
Representative Gathright,
Yes.
Representative Muse,
Yes.
Representative Bolden,
Yes.
Representative Sue Newman,
Yes.
Representative Murphy,
Yes.
Representative Ray Newman,
Yes.
Representative Vale,
Yes.
Representative Newell,
Yes.
Representative Selig,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yay.
and Chairman Roy.
Chair votes yes.
20 to 0.
The motion of inexpedient to legislate carries on a unanimous vote of 20-0. Any objection to consent? Seeing none, it'll go on consent, and I hereby close the executive session on House Bill 474 and open the final bill of the day, House Bill 512, and I recognize Representative Prue for a motion.
ITL, I believe. Oh, oh, yeah. Sorry, my bad. Let it pass. I'm so used to saying ITL.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Representative Pratt. The motion is ought to pass on the floor right now. Representative, would you like to speak to your motion?
Again, this is another one of those where ATF can kind of change its mind on things kind of quickly with no due process. So things that are made in New Hampshire and don't interstate commerce would be exempt from these laws and rapidly changing without rhyme or reason, as long as they stay in New Hampshire. So I think that's a pretty good thing.
Representative Pratt, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, I second this. There's 174 licensed gun manufacturers in New Hampshire. I'd like to support them. Those are people that are like you and me working in the state of New Hampshire. And I believe this would help them in their businesses. Also, the interstate commerce laws that were started in 1887 for the railroad have been overreached for many years in a lot of areas, and this would help protect that in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. In my mind, this bill is not about firearm safety, whatever side of the previous bills you come down on. This is about in my mind, the expansion and growth of the federal government over every little aspect of our life and our businesses. The ATF has jurisdiction over firearms because under the Interstate Commerce Clause, it was found, by the court many years ago that qualified. And so now they regulate everything about firearms, and one day they'll say this is legal, next day they say this isn't illegal. They're unelected bureaucrats. Having said that, we are protecting one of New Hampshire's biggest manufacturers and sources of revenue of our fellow citizens, who, be it a small manufacturer or a huge one, if it's made in New Hampshire and it stays in New Hampshire, it is not by any definition interstate commerce. And that's what we're trying to protect with this bill. That, I open it for discussion. I see Representative Newman, and I heard him too.
I just want to point out and read the last part of this bill, because I think it has the same problems that we just talked about on the previous bill. And it has to do with the penalty. Any public servant of the state of New Hampshire is defined in RSA 640:2 that enforces or attempts to enforce or act, law, statute, rule, or regulation of the government of the United States upon a personal firearm, firearm accessory, etc. They shall be guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. And then it goes on to say that the official agent that does the same kind of thing attempts to enforce, act, or order a law, statute, or rule, or regulation of the United States government of the United States, personal firearm or security accessory manufactured in New Hampshire, and the penalty is a Class B felony. So I think you may have law enforcement people going out to assist the government for other reasons, and I think that the penalties are not appropriate.
Thank you. Representative Janvrin, and then the Representative Muse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I got a hot mic, so I'll move it to the side. If you look at the sponsor and co-sponsor, you'll see that I'm actually co-sponsor of this legislation, and I'd like to explain why. It's not a secret. I worked at a camp where I taught firearms instruction for 2 years, 2 summers. The 2 summers I wasn't in this house. And one of the things that we noticed early on was that our ear protection, 1, was expensive, 2, didn't sometimes get put into the ear by 11-year-old boys and girls, that even as an instructor, we couldn't confirm that they installed it correctly. One of the things that we had contemplated in 2021 was to go to a firearms manufacturer in the state of New Hampshire and ask them for suppressors to lessen the report and the sonic noise of a firearm shot for our students. And we were informed that there were 2 ways to do that. One was we would go to the ATF and ask for permission to purchase them and pay a tax of $200 per device, or and pay that once, or we would go and form an LLC, appoint responsible persons under the ATF's regulations, purchase the items that we needed for suppression of the gunfire to save ears, and pay $200 blanket every year thereafter. So we looked at a cost-benefit analysis and realized that it was cheaper to buy earplugs, and earplugs, again, are not 100% foolproof if the student is not placing it in their ear correctly. So we did approach a firearm manufacturer in the state of New Hampshire. I won't discuss who it was, but they are in Newington. And they do produce suppressors. And they were willing to donate them to the nonprofit camp that I was working for. And we decided that cost-benefit analysis, it was easier for us to purchase ear protection, earplugs under the cost-benefit analysis. Because $200 a year may not sound like a lot to everybody in the room, but for a nonprofit it can be. So we admittedly are placing our students at a disadvantage and maybe at a risk of not having their ear protection correctly installed. What this bill does is it says if it's made in New Hampshire, sold in New Hampshire, and never leaves the state of New Hampshire, it is not interstate commerce. I would also argue that whether it be a nonprofit camp that I work at or a gun shooting range like White Birch or one of these other places that offer these for rent, making them pay a federal tax on an item that never leaves the state of New Hampshire violates the Interstate Commerce Clause and therefore is no longer under the jurisdiction of the United States of America. So that's why I decided that I would support this bill and become a co-sponsor for it. Those are the reasons why I'm supporting the OTP.
5-minute recess. Oh, let's not get.
Yeah, yes. Fix the thing.
Or get bigger wheels.
If the members could be seated, please. Don't make me pick up this hammer. I think I injured my rotator cuff. Okay, after discussion with the sponsor, I am going to recess this hearing until next Friday, which is the last day to act on a bill. And I've given him the opportunity to make some changes. I would encourage any members to approach him if you would like to see something or taken in or put out. This is the chance. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And that being said, I close or recess the hearing, and we are finished for the day. No, it's recess. And I appreciate all the subs coming in today. I appreciate Representative Reed stepping up to the plate, and again to the members of the public who sent us those gazillion emails. We did see them. I read many of them. Please stop.